Wow. I don't even know what to say about that finale. I mean, I will say this, like, it definitely did not disappoint. I will say that it did not disappoint. I That was quite the roller coaster ride, and yeah, I mean, I'll talk about my predictions, but also like there are some things I was right about certain things, although my whole prediction is totally off. But let me just say this: like the way that they really kind of got to the final outcome of this whole show, it just couldn't be any more perfect. I think the outcome that we did get out of this whole show, um, I think it was what it was meant to be. I think it's been hinted for a long, long time that these were going to be the fates for everyone around, with the Roy family, with Tom, with Jerry. Like, I mean, and there were even cases where I was just about right, like going in the right direction of where who I thought was going to get the position. Like, for one thing, like, but let's get down right to like the main part, like Tom getting becoming the CEO. Like, I mean, I know I initially thought it was going to be Greg. I think that had the Matson deal gone through, it would have been Greg. But I did say that if there was any possibility that there could be a chance, I think it would have been Tom, just because he is a bit more of that kisser upper. Like, he does give out that vibe that he is someone who will, answer the demands of someone superior to him. And I mean, yeah, although I was incorrect with the fact that that he and Shiv would have been, working together, like that was not the case. I was clearly way off. The fact that he was still being considered as a possible CEO, like that was something that I thought could have been a possible scenario, and that ended up becoming the case. Like, just to see just the whole U-turn from Matson, because he's been giving such like, an eerie vibe about Tom. Like, it seemed as if every move that Tom was making, he was this close to just being cut off, like totally from like his, luxury and his wealth, because of the fact that he was basically the chopping block. But that was not really the case. He actually seemed as if he was moving in the right direction and totally got Matson's attention. And the moment that we saw that, I was just like, oh man, things are about to get explosive. Like, things were going to go, it was like a roller coaster, right? I know I put Kendall as my top choice of, getting the CEO if the Matson deal didn't go through. So yeah, it was like either it could go in one or the other case, whether Matson goes, gets the, acquires the, Waystar Worko, or somehow the Roy siblings are able to keep Royco. And I mean, of course, if they were had to, keep the company, there's no other person who would have been able to be in the position other than Kendall, because he's someone who has the most experience. But even I noted that, he's about to, that there was going to be a chance of a downfall. Like, we keep seeing from each and every episode how, every time that he thought he was moving forward, he kept kind of, eating up his soul a little bit. Like, the little bit of soul that he had, he basically was selling that off, right? Like, the itty bitty, like, Kendall, of the weak Kendall, the vulnerable Kendall that we remember from like so many, episodes ago, was basically gone, right? We kept seeing more and more Logan in him. I kept saying that, he was giving very Michael Corleone vibes. And I think that there is sort of a level where if he had, kind of kept his cool and, hadn't gone too far into the extreme, then maybe this wouldn't have been effed up. But because of what we saw in the last moments, where he basically was abusing Roman, the fact that he, was yelling at Shiv, the fact that he was lying about the manslaughter, which I did say could have, come back to bite him. That could have been the one thing that would have come back to bite him. And that seemed to be the case that really solidified that he was not going to, become the CEO, because like the siblings realized that he's just not meant for it either, which I'll talk about in a second. So yeah, like, I mean, he basically met his downfall. I think for what we got as the outcome, it was meant to be, right? I mean, because for one thing, yeah, like Kendall was the most experienced, but at the end of the day, like, none of the Roys were capable of becoming a competent CEO. I think they all have such flaws that in one way or another, they just would not be able to keep the company on ground level. Like, there's going to be some sort of issue that would come from each and every person. Like, none of them have the skills, the negotiation, compensity or just about like the experience of it all to really just reach the level of Logan. Like none of them have it. And I think we've seen so many times that just because like, they may have worked with Logan for a little bit doesn't mean that any of them were the rightful, heirs to the company. Like I think all of them, I think the more we saw each of the episodes, the more we saw Succession, the more it was just proving that none of them deserve to be the CEO. I think that was clear cut. I think, having now watched that episode, like I think it made just so much sense. Like Kendall is just way over his head. Roman just does not have that propensity to really, run a business. Shiv is way too inexperienced, and there's just no way that, she's someone who can be taken too seriously. And of course, Connor has no interest in the business. And of course, like I think at that point, it's like, okay, well, let's end this cycle. I think one of the greatest things about this is that this was kind of, in a way, a very bittersweet ending. Because in one case, basically the whole family has now been cut off from their family branding, right? They don't have, they're going to get a lot of money out of the whole deal, but they have no control over their main family empire, right? They're cut out from that, right? But at the same time, when you think about it, I think in some ways cutting them off was necessary. I think that was the one thing that may have ended the cycle, right? Like ending that generational trauma. Because, we saw right at the end in, where Roman goes to a bar and he seems as if he, doesn't want to, sign off the thing and whatnot. At the end of the day, seeing him smile was like, I noticed that relief. I was like, wow, like this is a relief for him because he does not have to deal with the abuse anymore. Because, Logan is dead, but Kendall is giving off a lot of Logan vibes to the point where he was now basically selling his soul, becoming that abusive asshole, basically. And that would mean that for Roman, it would have been another whole cycle of abuse for him that, how much longer can he endure, right? Like we saw that what Kendall was doing with, his Stitch and basically, abusing him on the spot, right? And I think watching the way that we see Roman just smile knowing that this is the end, right? He doesn't have the company anymore, but he's still rich and he's now no longer, in that abuse anymore. He's now free from it. I think that, to me, like, for me, that's a very happy ending for Roman, without a doubt, because I think that, again, at the end of the day, he was far more hurt than he was ever kind of leaping from everything that was happening in the show, because he was always the one who was kind of being attacked, who was always the one who was taking all the slaps. Even Logan was still slapping him like here and there. And the thing was is that even with Kendall, like he was no longer protecting his little brother anymore. He was more greedy about the company. And so it made far more sense that, at least in some sense, almost everyone had a happy ending. I think in the case of Roman, he had a happy ending. Even though he's no longer the CEO, I think this would have been the best choice for him, knowing kind of, taking into account all the factors. I think, of course, the biggest loser is Kendall. Like, there's no doubt about it. He's the one, I think, out of everyone who's most affected, it is Kendall. He no longer has, the company. He's not the CEO. He's been told his whole life that he's supposed to be the future of the company and, was groomed in that way only to see that he doesn't get that, right? And he doesn't know what he has beyond that life. And not just that, but I think of everyone around him, like out of all the characters in the show, the biggest loser is him. He has no family. His children have left him. His wife has left him. Jesse has left him. He does not have the company. I think at this point we can all say that Shiv and Roman are probably going to cut ties with Kendall at this point, just because of how he behaved at that board vote. So that's probably gonna be, like, he has basically no one at this point aside from the bodyguard, Colin. So yeah, like he's definitely the bottom. He's definitely the biggest loser of the Succession game. Whereas I think Roman, in a sense, he is the one who succeeded, hence the pun intended, succeeded in the game, even though it didn't go in the way where he would be the CEO. So that was just some things to take into consideration, of course. And I think that even with Kendall, right? Like the fact that he lost everything came at a price, right? Like this is how he was acting, this is how he was behaving the last few episodes. The moment that he decided to kind of think like Logan, I think that's basically where his downfall started to spiral. So that made far more sense why Kendall at the end of the day didn't get it. Like I knew that it just seemed too good to be true that he was going to become the CEO. I mean, yeah, the statistics shows that he is the most capable of the position. And had it gone in their way, then it would have been a clear cut that it would have been not Logan, it would have been Kendall. But it didn't go in their way. And of course, there's things that were taken into consideration, like, the fact that he was turning into Logan, even probably more ferocious. The fact that, they mentioned the manslaughter. Like, I knew that was going to be mentioned because I felt like that was one big thing that, I just felt like it just never was addressed ever again. And the fact that he told his siblings, like, I was just like, there's just no way that they're not going to bring this up again. And so, of course, that got brought up. And I think that basically solidified his faith right there that, he killed someone. He got someone killed. He got it covered up by his father. And I mean, that in itself just makes him a very horrible person to become the CEO for Waystar. So, and I think that Shiv and Roman knew that. So, and even in the case with Shiv. So let's go right down to Shiv because, of course, she was a deciding factor. She was the one who broke that tiebreaker. And I think we all knew that. I think it was going to come, at the end of the day, it was going to come down to her, right? Because, I mean, for one thing, we knew for a fact, so this was basically clear cut that Matsson was going to go behind her back, that he was not going to keep his promise for Shiv, allowing her to become the CEO. I think that was pretty clear cut. Like, even Matsson himself had said that, that he just cannot handle Shiv because there's just so much going on. And he has like all these mixed vibes about her that, he just doesn't think that he is capable enough to really kind of concentrate with her around. Of course, with several different scenarios to consider. And so I think that was pretty clear cut. We knew that was going to happen. That was going to be the case. So that was definitely one point for me for getting that part right. The fact that she was the one who, even after knowing that Matsson was going to go behind her back and not choose her, I think the fact that she decided in the long run to still sell, it says a lot about her character. So for one thing, I think the moment that you started seeing how Kendall started to react, like the way that he was behaving, the way that he was just being very cocky, the way that he just thought, everything was going to go in his favor, the fact that, he wasn't really, considering his flaws as like a potential CEO, the fact that, just because Shiv and Roman are not capable doesn't mean that Kendall is the perfect choice for it, right? He also has problems too. I think at the end of the day, like, you have to kind of appreciate that Shiv knew that, that in the best of the business and the best of everyone's interests, that, perhaps the whole family shouldn't have the company at all, right? I mean, this is something that was coming in her head, right? Like, this is such a very deep emotional moment for her. And I mean, I can't even imagine how she's feeling right now, just knowing that, everything has happened, everything has just transpired. And at the end of the day, she decides to vote against her brothers and go move forward with the Gojo deal, despite the fact that in the end of the run, she's not going to win, right? She already knows. I think what really was a big factor is that at the end of the day, she was not going to win in either case. And I think that the better choice was for her to stick with Gojo, because who knows how Kendall would have been. He seemed like he was becoming pretty rash. He was going to become a bit impulsive, the way that he was behaving. I think that, out of the two choices, the worst was if Kendall was CEO. And I think that at the end of the day, and not just that, but of course, the fact of the matter is that they mentioned the whole, he killed someone. And I think she did kind of consider her moralities a little bit. I mean, I think there are still other cases where, even in her case, there is kind of like a lot of people are talking about, of course, how the whole outcome that, she's basically now, it's basically a full circle for her, because now she's basically going to be like her mother, like her, kind of like her generational trauma just being passed down to her. The fact that at the end of the day, she's now going to just be a trophy wife to someone else, and probably going to have like, I don't know. I guess you can say that's like a loveless marriage that we saw, because the way that, Tom and Shiv were in that car, and not necessarily embracing their hands together. Like that was kind of giving me the vibe that, well, they're probably just going to be there for the image, I guess, at this point. And I think at the end of the day, like for Shiv, I think her best option was to stick with Tom, knowing that he at least is going to be the CEO, that one that he's going to have the power, even though Madsen's going to be the one calling all the shots. But even with that being the case, I think her safe bet would have been to stick with Tom, regardless of that. And I think that, if it meant having to sacrifice her independency and become just a mother like the way that her mother was, like, maybe even a horrible one, I think that's for her is what she wanted to stick with. So, I mean, for Shiv, it is definitely, I would say, like, there was really no win or lose. I mean, in a sense, she's still the loser, but she was far more strategic in picking the option that was best fitting her needs, and that, of course, was sticking with Tom. And I think that at least with Tom, like, even if Tom may question about whether or not they should continue on with that marriage or not, at least they can be there to, take care of Shiv. And I think that's, again, the whole thing that, probably is why Shiv stuck with Tom becoming the CEO. I think that became the reality check for her. And I think for her to make that deciding vote was very important. I think that, that was the best situation for everyone. Again, Roman came out of there finally, no longer being abused. Kendall, he's not going to be that cocky a-hole, anything or any way, or becoming basically like Michael Corleone. Because, I mean, just imagine if he did become the CEO, like, just imagine how much abuse of power that he probably would have emulated if he were to be CEO. Because we did see kind of a snippet, like we kind of saw a tease of what could have been had he become the CEO. He basically was taking things way out of control, and become very abusive. So I think that ended up becoming a very good decision right there. Of course, I mean, I'll talk about one thing in a second with the mansion thing, but the Greg thing. I mean, I thought for a second that Greg really had the notch of becoming the CEO just because of the fact that, he's someone who is a kisser-upper. So I thought the person who was probably sitting across from Madsen would have been Greg in that last episode. But I guess, there was no one sitting across from Madsen. He was just simply, calling her, confirming about the whole mannequin thing, and that's it. So it did seem as if, for Greg, he was mostly siding with Kendall, knowing that he had his better choice there. But the fact that even after betraying Tom, right? I think at the end of the day, knowing that they're still sticking together, the fact that Tom is still going to, the fact that they're going to be because they're inseparable. I think that that's kind of a really great thing. So I guess you can say Greg isn't. I mean, the fact that he did make a huge mistake. The fact is that he isn't a loser, of course. Like, he seems to be sticking. He seems to be kind of rising as well. So, like, I mean, who knows what's going to happen to him? I think right now it's kind of ambiguous, but at least he still has a job. So good for him. So at least he has something going on at Waystar, right? And not just that, but having, Tom's back to protect him. And let's just talk about Jerry, because I knew for a fact that even though she's been kind of, living a far more low profile this whole season, especially after having been fired, I knew for a fact that Jerry was gonna, was going to rise. Like, there was like a sense that she was going to, climb back up after that firing. There was just no, qualms about that. Like, that was going to be the case. I felt like Jerry was going to be one of the biggest winners going into it. Like, just because, again, she has experience. She's someone who's very, a big asset, like, for Gojo. And I mean, that's very clear for Tom's case, because Tom knows that Jerry's a very important asset, as well as Carolina. And we already knew that Frank and Gary were going to be out. I think even Hugo was also in that kill list. So they all were going to be out. Jerry and Carolina were already secured from the beginning, of course. And now Greg also seemed a bit more secured even after that. So yeah, I mean, just to see Tom rising, like, I know there's a lot of people who, like, I know there's kind of like this divide in terms of how people feel about Tom. Like, if you're a very strong Team Shiv, then you're clearly going to consider Tom as a villain. But if you're someone who really sympathizes, with Tom, because, I mean, the thing is that with Tom, he's definitely been mistreated since, the first season, right? he's been, I guess you can say he's sort of the black sheep just because of the fact that, he's only associated with the family through marriage. And because of that, the whole nepotism thing comes into play, and that, whether or not he actually, deserves, the fact that he got the ATN position and all that sort of stuff. Like, we can take all that into consideration. But at the end of the day, like, we can tell that with how much Tom is willing to try and rise up to the occasion, the fact that this is a guy who was willing to go to jail just because of the whole sexual assault allegations that were happening, the fact that, he was basically in deep waters because of the fact that he was, the head of the cruise division, the fact that, even with the ATN situation, with the election night, like, he was making all the calls. He's the one who's taking a lot of hits from that. And still, even with that being the case, like, I think it worked everything in his favor, right? The fact is that, as someone like him who's really been kind of dragged, kind of been, tossed around by everyone here and there, especially by Shiv, right? Like, Shiv has always been the one playing around with him, manipulating him, not really showing him as a worthy person, right? I think now we're finally seeing Tom becoming a very, solidified person as a result of his actions in the last 3 seasons. Like, now he's finally getting the payoff for everything that he has done. Like, even after Logan had passed away, right? Like, he thought he was doomed. It was over for him. His marriage with Shiv was already in, deep waters because of his betrayal. And yet, at the end of the day, he's the one who really went up on top. Like, who would have thought? I mean, I feel like it would have made a lot of sense, just because even though he is associated with the Roy family, it's only through my marriage, not through my blood. So, like, in a sense, he's technically not a Roy. And also, he's someone who, again, Matsson can, control and make sure that if he has any ideas, Tom is going to go through with them. He's going to have no, second thoughts. He's going to have no hesitations about going through with the plans, as long as, they come into agreement with things. And yeah, I mean, and you can see, like, just the power play, just the way that he really exudes that position. You can tell how he's finally won, right? And, like, it's really funny because I was looking up the Twitter comments. Everyone's calling him basically the Princess Diana of this whole, show. And I guess you can say that. I mean, I'm not going to go too deep into it. I think that at the end of the day, I can see in the favor why Tom was always destined to get to this position, just because of everything that's happened since the beginning of the show. Like, even then, like, I wouldn't even be surprised if Logan had actually ever considered Tom as a worthy opponent or worthy candidate, just because of the fact that he is someone who really understands what the job is, what he needs to do. He isn't an idiot like some of his kids. Like, I think, and I'll talk about that in a second because I do need to mention that, but at the end of the day, Tom seemed like he was most likely to win this. I mean, even though I put him as number 5, I even said that I was kind of switching in between Shiv and Tom, just because they're just so, intermingled, and it's like kind of hard to tell. I still did not think that he was off the game. I think there was still like this dark horse out of him that, that really would have, pushed him up to the occasion. It worked out at the end for him. So yeah, that was mind blowing to see, just to see him finally, win. Like, he won. I think the biggest winner, of course, is going to be Tom. And of course, the other big winner is going to be Matsson, because even though he did have a little bit of a tinkle there with, Shiv having temporarily switched sides, eventually switched back. And it's not because of the fact that she was siding with Matsson. It was just more so because of what she think was the best for everyone, and realizing that, if this is how Ken's going to be, then this is not the future that they want for this company, right? So at the end of the day, that was just, again, a really big power move. I think, again, Matsson's a winner, Tom is the winner, Jerry's definitely a winner, Carolina is a winner. I wouldn't say Roman is a winner in this case, just because, again, of the whole, situation with his abuse in the family, and now seeing that again with Ken. Like, that I feel like he's a winner in a sense, like that, it's a bit more subtle. Of course, I think with Shiv, it could go either or. I think it's really hard to say where she is. I think she's kind of in the middle. What do you even call anyone who's like in the middle? Neutral ground. Like, she isn't really the winner, but she also isn't really the biggest loser. I think, I guess you can say she trends more into the loser side, just because of the fact that she did not become a CEO. She was played by Matsson. And at the end of the day, like, she picked the fate that, she didn't think was ideal for her, but yet was the best option. So I wouldn't say she's a total loser. I think that, again, she's kind of in the middle, but definitely gonna get. But I think at the end of the day, she definitely was the one who, you know, was already kind of pulling the white flag already, just because like nothing was gonna go in her favor anyway. So it was a matter of what option was best for her. So that's right there. Of course, Hugo is a loser. Uh, I think Kendall again is the biggest loser that we saw in tonight's episode. I wouldn't say Frank and Gary are losers. I mean, yeah, they got fired. They're let go, but they got the money, right? So at least they have that. So I wouldn't say they're total losers, but I guess you can say that they're losers in a sense. Um, yeah, I think that. Oh, and Greg, I think again, even though he may have fudged up, I think he's still. I guess you can call him a winner, just because at least it still worked out either or. Because he was definitely someone again who would have been okay in either or side, just because again of how sneaky he is, how valuable he is. The fact that he's someone who can really get information very quickly, I think that may have been very beneficial into his side of things, probably why he was being kept, because he is someone who really understands how to get information very quickly, and I think that again may have worked in his favor. And again, of course, like, we can't just have Tom and Greg without them together, right? So like the fact that even Tom acknowledged that even after his betrayal, like that's one great thing coming out of it. But yeah, no, I think at the end of the day, I think the outcome that we did get out of the Succession series finale was very satisfying, very fulfilling. I think it couldn't have been any better than that. I think, and not just that, but I think the whole episode has been such a roller coaster ride. I think the fact that, like, by the time that we got to, the kitchen scene where they were trying to annoy Kendall as the king, right? I had a feeling that, oh, this is not going to turn well for everyone, or especially in Kendall's case. And I think that once we got to that, I was like, we still have like another 30 minutes of this episode. I don't think he's like, by the time we got to it, I was like, oh yeah, Kendall's not going to become the CEO, isn't it? Like, I had that sense. And it basically, like, I mean, in the beginning, of course, I thought I was very confident that Ken was going to get it if the, the trend was moving in his favor. But because of the fact that it started so soon, that he was winning big time, that the things were going in his favor so early on, that's when I knew that, okay, he's not going to become a CEO. I think that was kind of the foreshadow going into it. That was like, wow, he's not going to get it. The Gojo deal is going to go through, isn't it? Like, I had that sense, and that ended up becoming the whole situation. That ended up becoming the outcome of it. And I think again, like, when we think about it, I think there's that one scene again where Shiv and Roman are talking to each other, like they even said, like, at one point Logan may have told each and every one of them that they're all possible successors to the company. But at the end of the day, I think what matters is that I think Logan probably wasn't being serious about it. Maybe he was considering it, but I think the more that he watched everyone, and the more that he started to really recognize their motives, their goals, their ambitions, and what they're able to kind of do in terms of, performance wise and all that sort of stuff, I think he knew deep down that none of his kids really deserved it. I think that's probably why he was actually moving forward with the Gojo deal too, just because, like, not only would they get a lot of money out of that, but I think he probably knew that none of his kids were, none of his kids deserve to become the CEO. I think that's probably what he had the sense of. And I think that, and not just that, but the fact that he still continued to push for the whole Gojo deal to go through, even after this, the Roys decided to, they did not want to continue on with the deal that was initially approved, and then eventually led to his death. I think that, this is probably what Logan probably wanted. Like, he didn't want any of his kids to become the future of the Empire. I think that he knew that the line ends there with them. And but here's the thing though, for one thing, it technically does not end the line there, of course, because Shiv is having a child. So technically speaking, there is a royal child who can become the future heir of the company. It just won't be a Roy. It will probably be a Bobskin, so we'll see how that works. So in a sense, Logan's legacy does live on through blood, just not under the name of Roy, of course. And even then, Roman himself says that. He says, yeah, he wanted this to continue off through blood, but his father probably didn't consider Kendall's kids as, as blood, right? Like, I feel like it's, yeah, like, it's pretty clear. Like, so, and I think that we've seen time and time how, Logan has felt about Kendall's kids. So I think that's probably where he was just like, yeah, no, I don't think anyone really deserves this. Let's just sell the whole company and just end it all right there. And I think that's probably why he was moving forward with it in the, in the beginning, just that, there's just no one to really take over the company who's a worthy, candidate for it. And so, I guess in the end of the day, again, it becomes full circle, I think, and I think this is what just having seen everything that we've seen, that this is probably the best for everyone. This is what, was basically going to be the destiny for everyone this whole show. I think the one thing I do want to mention, of course, is that there are some questions, of course. Like, I will say this, the finale was spectacular. I totally enjoyed it, just having that roller coaster ride of emotions, knowing that you have the excitement, the disappointment, the shock, the surprise. I think that I think the finale had everything with that going on for sure. Of course, there are some questions, right? I think one of the things going to season 4 is that it wasn't just the fact that, we were having 10 episodes. The fact that each episode was happening in a matter of a daily basis, right? So episode 1 was day 1, episode 2 is day 2, episode 3 is day. It wasn't as if there was a huge gap in between episodes in terms of the timeline. No, they were happening like pretty consistently daily. Like, they were, happening on each and every, like, each day next to each other. So of course, like, going into the finale, there's gonna be a lot of questions. Like, yeah, I mean, it's probably by the time we got to this finale, right? It's probably been just 3 or 4 days since the election, right? And so there's definitely a lot of questions about the whole election situation. They did kind of, subtly mention about the whole Wisconsin thing. So it looks like that is going to the courts. Although I do want to know who actually officially wins. But the fact that it's being challenged, I wonder where that would have meant. Like, what could have been the outcome of that whole situation. Like, if that's going to go to the courts, that would mean that Jared Mencken may not be the president. So that would also kind of put Connor in a very bad position, of course, because then he's not going to get the ambassadorship at what was it, Slovenia. So yeah, I guess you can say Connor is also not in a pretty good position right now. I mean, I think right now Connor is the one that's really up in the airs, but again, that'll be a matter of whether Jared Mencken does win or not. I think that having heard that quick mention about the courts may kind of hit at something, which again, we won't know because we're not going to have a season 5. So that's going to suck, but we'll see if they ever, address that. I don't know. We'll see. Other things, of course, like, again, just seeing that last scene between Shiv and Tom and what this would mean for their relationship, right? Because we did see early on where Tom was still questioning about whether or not he still wants to continue off with the marriage, whereas Shiv wanted to continue. She wanted to keep their marriage alive, and I guess that, again, goes into the situation where at the end of the day, she got what she wanted, just because even if she didn't become the CEO and she wasn't going to become the head of EdTN because of the fact that, Kendall would have been the CEO, I think at the end of the day, she did get the one thing that she wanted, was to keep Tom, right? So I guess you can say she's a winner in that sense, but I think with Shiv, she could have been a winner in some cases and loser in some other cases. So, but yeah, I think with that, like, it still raises a question of what this would mean for Tom and Shiv. Like, what this would mean for their relationship moving forward. Is it going to be just all an act when they come into the public, or is she going to be, like, the fact that it kind of alludes to the fact that she might just become like her mother, where she's just going to become a housewife and taking care of her child that's going to be born a couple of months from now, right? So there's definitely gonna be a lot of questions about that, like what that could mean for them. Of course, like, where Jerry would be, where Carolina would be. I already mentioned about the election. The fact is, like, what's gonna happen in the whole situation that Kendall has killed someone? Is that something that's ever gonna come out to the public? I have no idea about that. I think another big question, of course, is whether or not, there's even a chance for the siblings to ever reconcile, because I think after this after this whole blowout that happened, in that room across from the voting room. The fact of the matter is that, it does seem as if, they're now going to be estranged from Kendall. So, like, that's going to be a very big question mark. Like, is there even a future for them where they can now be united in some other front, or is that kind of it for them? Like, are they going to be separated for the rest of their lives? Big question about that, of course. And yeah, I think I think that basically sums up everything that I have seen so far with the show. I mean, it's been such an incredible journey watching Succession. I mean, again, who would have thought that season 4 would have been the end of the road for, this HBO series? Again, like, each and every season was just kind of bumping up the road in terms of how they were bringing in the big guns and really just giving us such spectacular storytelling, amazing performances, incredible dialogue. Like, I've never seen such a pristine show like Succession. And I mean, yeah, I love my Game of Thrones, I love my House of Dragon, but when you have something as sophisticated and as, so sophisticated as very, well thought out like Succession, where you have to really not just take in consideration like the performances and the setting and the premise, but trying to make sure that you really embody the essence of like this business like world where you have a family empire, where you have things like, nepotism, the thing that you have, Wall Street and all that sort of stuff, having the correct jargon and vocabulary that meets sort of those standards. Like, I mean, the showrunners have done such an incredible job just really just executing this whole show and like really putting in the efforts, putting in all the ideas just to bring forth a show like this, making us having based kind of our own, modern day version of Game of Thrones really kind of happening before our eyes, and doing so in a way there where not only has the show been so great from the beginning, but doing so in a way that it just kept getting better and better up until the finale, where even the finale really just ended off on a great note. Like, I have to say, like, you have to applaud them. You have to applaud the showrunners for doing such an incredible job with this. And I mean, I'm going to miss Succession, but I will just say that I think the journey that we had, it's been an incredible one. And I'm glad to say that I was able to do a reaction video for it, for the final episode. And yeah, I mean, it was definitely worth discussing a lot about Succession. Whether or not if my predictions were correct, I would say at least there's some things that, having noted, I did, predicted those could have been potential possibilities. And even then, like, I have to say, like, the outcome that we got, it worked out. Like, at least we didn't get like the brand the broker situation. So as long as we didn't get that, as long as we didn't get something that was just kind of like out of the ordinary, that just made no sense. But everything made sense going into this finale. And I think, again, like, you have to applaud the showrunners for really just being so precise, specific, and detailed with the show. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say about Succession. Like, this is it. This was the finale. Let me know what your thoughts are. Did you also watch Succession from the beginning like I did? And what are your thoughts? Like, did any of your predictions, come out true, or did it not? Some things that you thought should have happened did not. Maybe there's some things that, they should have addressed and they just kind of forgot. What do you think about the episode overall? Do you like the finale? Do you think it was satisfying, fulfilling finale in comparison to other finales that we had before? I think it was a really great finale, in my opinion, but maybe you just thought it was just, maybe you had other thoughts about it. And what are your thoughts about kind of the outcome of all the characters? Do you agree that this was what it was meant to be? Or maybe, the showrunners may have fumbled? Let me know in the comments down below, and make sure to like and subscribe.